I like to dedicate this to all of the Creator's righteous children. I have some food in my bag for you. Not that edible food, that food you eat. No, I have some food for thought. Since knowledge is infinite, it has infinitely fell on me.
Peace. So this audio is going to be on Eminem, and it's going to be on the music industry, hip-hop specifically, and it's going to be on these new school rappers, MCs, whatever you want to call them. So Eminem, J. Cole, and other various older rappers, MCs that have been making music lately have been going at these new school rappers, these trap rappers, SoundCloud rappers, whatever you want to call them, the littles of the world, right? And they've been going at them pretty harshly. They've been not valuing their contributions to hip-hop, if they even can have any contributions to hip-hop, and I will let you know my opinion on them later. But they've been going at them, putting out jabs, basically just because I don't want to say their music sucks, but I mean it sucks. I'm just gonna outright say it. Now, I'm 26. I basically was born into hip hop. I've listened to hip hop basically my whole life, and yeah, I do think this current crop of hip hop sucks. I'm just gonna say it, but it hasn't started with the littles of the world. It actually started when I was in high school, and I just saw there was a lackluster amount of hip hop and what they wanted to call hip hop, and most of it was really poppy. And there's a lot of reasons for why hip-hop music is the way it is today, that a lot of people are not looking at the full picture of why hip-hop is the way it is today. And so I just kind of wanted to break it down, talk about, why these rappers keep going at these little artists, and basically why hip-hop is in the state it is today. So for me, this is the reasons why I think hip-hop is the way it is today. Number one, so the really good artists from the 80s and 90s of hip-hop, who are really old now, and I don't mean really old, like really, really old, but like they're in their 40s, sometimes in their 50s, so they're older. They really haven't been in the game for a hot minute. Most of them either really were popping, really were spreading knowledge and really being dope back in the 80s and 90s. They did their thing, and then they either dropped off, stayed in the 90s, dropped off, and didn't really make any more music, transitioned to singing in some capacity, like your Queen Latifahs, or started making movies and TV shows, like your Queen Latifahs, your Ice Cubes, even Common to a degree, your LL Cool J's. And there's nothing wrong with any of those things, because for a lot of the time that hip-hop has been around, everybody has always said that hip-hop is a young man's sport. And that's fine, to a degree. Okay? I don't personally think there is an age limit for hip-hop, depending on what you're talking about. So when a Little Kim, Nicki Minaj, come out and they make these raunchy songs and lyrics about sex and all of these other things, I personally don't think that they're going to have longevity, because when you're 50 years old, I don't think you're going to want to talk about those things anymore. Now, of course, people are still going to hear them, but it's going to be awkward when you're 50 or 60 still talking about these things, i.e. Madonna, but that's another story. And so I don't personally think there's an age limit in hip-hop, but I also don't think that talking about sex and all these raunchy things at 60 years old is very classy. Now, when it comes to people like the pioneers of hip-hop, like the Run DMCs of the world, the Queen Latifahs of the world, De La Soul, LL Cool J, even people in the 90s like Common and Ice Cube and all these people, With the exception of Common, because he's still making music out here, the rest of you have pretty much gone to movies and TV shows and other avenues of business to help make money in this hip-hop game, because as we know, hip-hop is not just the rapping, MCing part of it, or even the DJing part of it. It also can be in different modes of making money as advertisements, as making new technology like Dr. Dre did with Beats. And there's lots of other avenues and ways to be a part of this hip-hop culture, right? We've seen people make clothing lines and clothing brands and all of these types of things. So yeah, I understand that. Where these older MCs, rappers, where they come into the topic of these little ones that are making music today is that I personally feel like either they went commercial and started doing movies and TV and stuff. They started doing brand deals and making clothing and doing all those types of things. They started singing, so they didn't really do any more like rapping hip hop, or they passed away, or just stayed in the 90s and stayed in their lane. Out of that came these rappers, right? Came these little rappers, little Yachty, little Pump, little Tekashi 6ix9ine, little this, little that. The reason for these little people, yes, it starts with Lil Wayne. Definitely. I think that Soulja Boy, Lil Wayne, Future, all combined are the reasons why we have these little rappers in the first place. I also believe, though, that the reason why hip-hop hasn't sounded the same for a very, very, very long time and has basically been popping out and just making terrible music for a while, and I mean mostly in the mainstream, because if you look in the underground, you would find a plethora of amazing artists, but what they're playing on the radio sucks, and it is what it is. And I think the reason for that is because the artists who were making music in the 80s and 90s, like I said, popped out, movies, TV, brand deals, stayed in the 90s, singing, or passed away. Because of those things, they're not as ingrained in the hip-hop community as they once were when they were younger. And that's cool. I mean, I'm not saying you have to be. That's cool. I mean, look at Will Smith. And he has a son who is a rapper, who's making music, and he is involved in that. But he's more involved in his brand as Will Smith and his movies and everything. And he is getting back into the studio, which I'm so excited about. And it's good that he's helping his son and giving him, pointers and tips here and there. But Jaden can do it on his own. And for the most part, I think Jaden is one of the better rappers in the 21st century world. But, I just think that these artists from the 80s and 90s, they took that route and they kind of let hip-hop just do what it was going to do. And I think with that, even artists from the early 2000s, and I think with that, they did not leave any breadcrumbs for this next generation, right? So they didn't take them under their wing. They didn't help them when it came to making music, making this hip-hop music, right? Back in the 90s and the late 80s, we had NWA, and then we had Dr. Dre become his own thing. And then he discovers Eminem. And what does he do? Even though Eminem was already an incredible artist, an incredible rapper, he took him under his wing. He took him under his wing and helped him with the production side. He helped him with being his mentor. He helped him really hone his craft. And, even though some people might say that his first 2 albums were not that great, and his last few albums he's put out haven't been great either, and the best album he's ever put out has been the Eminem Show, but that's just my opinion, so don't come for me. But basically, you know, he had the backing of Dr. Dre. He had the backing of these people. Even today, you know what I mean? I don't like Jay-Z as a person, but I respect him as an artist. And, you know, he took J. Cole under his wing, so that's dope. You know, Dr. Dre, when Kendrick Lamar first came out, was really, really for him. And that's really awesome, you know? Like, there are certain artists who have had the promotion of these artists who already made names for themselves in this hip-hop world and have been making music since the 90s and late 80s in some cases. And that's really important, right? That's really important. And even, you know, with, you know, so you had Dr. Dre take on Eminem, and then Eminem found 50. And so because of that, you know, you've had this lineage of the shady, you know, aftermath, you know, record label of Dr. Dre, then Eminem, then 50, and D12 to a degree, but then they broke up, and that's another story. But, you know, you had these artists who would be a part of the hip-hop community, take another rapper they find and take them under their wing, train that rapper, and then have that rapper find another rapper and take him under his wing and help train that rapper. And I think that's really important. And I think that's something that's totally missing from today's hip-hop. The old school generation from the 80s and 90s who were about something, who were talking about something, who were really honing their craft and really propelling the culture forward, aren't doing that anymore. They're not taking these artists under their wing. They're not helping to hone their craft. They're not giving them tips and knowledge. And they're not even helping them with their history. Because most of these artists today who try to act like they're rappers don't even know the first thing about hip-hop. And wouldn't know the first thing about hip-hop if they hit them on the head. They don't care about history. They don't care about what's right and what's wrong. They don't care about disrespecting legacies in Tupac and Biggie. They don't care about any of these things, right? And I know it's because they didn't grow up in the 90s, and they didn't grow up in even the early 2000s to a degree, and they didn't grow up during these times where caring about these types of things and giving props to the originators of this genre was a huge thing. And if you weren't doing that, you were publicly shamed. Like, publicly shamed. And even though for a lot of these little rappers are getting shamed, they're not getting shamed in the same way that they would otherwise. And that also has to do with the commercialization of hip-hop. Because hip-hop has become a global genre and has become the number one genre in the world, a lot more people from different various backgrounds, especially white kids, have been glomming on to these artists. And that's fine. I'm super, super happy for hip-hop. I'm super happy for where it's going to a degree. I'm just really happy it's the number one genre in the world, because you couldn't have told me, you know, when I was growing up in the 90s or when my siblings were growing up in the 80s and 70s that hip-hop would have been anything but a flash in the pants, right? And that's what critics said back in the day. But now it's the number one genre in the world, and that's incredible. Commercially, the sounds of hip-hop are not the best. And I know for a lot of kids who grew up in the 90s, who are my age, in their 20s, who grew up in the 90s, and who really did listen to a lot of the pillars and pioneers of this hip-hop game, you know what I mean? The MC Lights of the world, Queen Latifah, the Common Sense, the Outkast, A Tribe Called Quest, De La Soul, you know, the KRS-Ones and the Talib Kweli's and the Mos Defs and the you know, all these artists, the Tupacs, the Biggies, you know, DOS Effects, you know, all of these artists who were making incredibly huge impacts on hip-hop back then and were doing incredible things with it, because they got older, or they just fell off, or people passed away, things happen. And sadly, they didn't take the time to care for these younger artists. And so when a person like Eminem or J. Cole, and I actually liked, the song by Eminem that he had on his Kamikaze album, and I liked, the songs that J. Cole had on his album, and I respect what they have to say 100%. But I also feel like, and yes, I agree with them 100%, because I don't like the new littles out there in the world. I think they're clouding the reputation of hip-hop and making it into something that isn't seen as hard work, isn't seen as a passion, isn't seen as something that people did not just to eat, because I know people did it to eat. Of course, they did it to secure the bag so they could eat and provide for their families. I'm not saying that's not something they did, but they also had a passion for it, because you could tell in the music. Like, if they never got paid a day in their life, some of these artists from back in the day would have done this anyways. They would have still been out here making music, making beats, rhyming their ass off, being incredible, because they cared about the craft. And that's what's important. And I don't think these littles out here care about the craft. They're just here to be a hot flash in the pants for mainstream consumers. And what are they going to be in 20 years? Are they going to be remembered for their hot lyrics that people are going to remember and be able to quote day after day for the rest of their life? There are still so many Tupac, Biggie, A Tribe Called Quest, Common Sense, so many artists, Lauryn Hill. There's so many artists who have so many quotable lines from their rhymes that I can go back and spew off the top of my head because they were so memorable. And I just don't feel like that's what this generation, my niece and nephew's generation, are going to be able to do one day. They're not going to have lyrics that they're going to be able to go back to and be like, this was a solid bar. They're not. And back to J. Cole and Eminem, I respect what they have to say on their records. I do, 100%. And I agree with them. I'm an old head. Leave me alone. But what I don't personally like that much is you go after these artists, but where are you? Where is your generation? Huh? Yes, J. Cole is more part of the new school, but he's still up there in age. So he grew up during the golden eras of hip-hop. So where are you guys now trying to help these little kids make this music? You shit all over them, and rightfully so. But where are you? We cannot blame the fact that hip-hop has gone so low. If it was on an IQ scale, it would be like 0 at this point of lyrics and everything, to the point where it's just trash, garbage. But I ask, where are you old heads who want to come and criticize this new, genres of music and, the way that these new school kids are doing it? But where are the old heads, right? Where are the old heads to come and put some sense and knowledge into these kids? Because for a fact that these kids are just clout chasing. They don't know anything about hip hop. They didn't grow up on good hip hop either. Most kids today will say, oh yeah, but I grew up on Cudi and I grew up on Kanye. And I'm not saying that those two weren't incredible examples of good hip hop music. I'm not going to say that, because they are 100%. I love Cudi so much. I'm on a no Kanye zone right now because I'm mad at him still, but that's another story. We do know that his first 3 albums were classics. We aren't even going to take that away. But just because they grew up on both Cudi and Kanye, and that's cool, doesn't mean they really know their hip-hop history at all. And that's the difference. Cudi and Kanye both know their hip-hop history, and that's why their classic albums are so classic. Man in the Moon, classic. You know, Kanye's albums, classic. But that's only because they know their hip-hop history, and they work with the right people, and they know their producers, and they're really about it. Y'all are not about it. And it's only because these older cats who were in the game 20, 15, even 10 years ago are not taking the time to work with these little artists and help them to hone their craft. So of course, these little artists aren't going to be like, okay, I've grown up in the past probably 10 years to 20 years max, 15 at that. And who's been out during that time? You know, who was out in the past 15 years that was actually popping? You know, Kid Cudi, Kanye West. And that's really about it. Because, and Lil Wayne. I will give Lil Wayne. And that's it. To be honest. You know, I think people always knew about Jay-Z, but that's just because he's always been around. And that's it. You know what I mean? The really, really good artists who were making music that was socially conscious, that was about something, that was party music but had a message, that was just about life in general. It was good storytelling. You could totally take a bar and still recite it today and it would be classic still. All of those things have gone out the window because we are not teaching the next generation about hip-hop. And I think that's a problem. That is why a lot of artists today are not that talented and not that good, because they don't understand rhyme structure, they don't understand how to make a hot 16, and they don't understand beats, they don't understand anything. If it sounds cool on their laptop, if it sounds cool on SoundCloud, and if your white next door neighbor's little son is going to listen to that song, it doesn't matter because it's probably going to be a smash hit. You're probably going to get signed, or you're probably going to get some type of Instagram clout, and you're going to be on top. And that's all that matters to these young kids. And I know that, you know, we do live in a society where social media rules everything. And that is another part and step in this evolution of hip-hop. Social media is everything. So, of course, if it's not popping on social media, if it's not popping on SoundCloud, if it's not popping on YouTube, no one cares. And it's sad. Because back in the day, we didn't have any of these things at all. Like, these things were not even in our radar. And even when it became in the late 2000s, in the mid to late 2000s, when the internet started to become a little bit poppin' with like MySpace and like early YouTube, it still wasn't like this at all. You still had to be out there in the world hustling. You still had to be out there in the world with good bars, with good hooks, with good production. You still had to be out there really caring about the craft. And that's why I love J. Cole so much. And that's why I love Kendrick Lamar so much. Because they still come from that mentality. And that's why their music is so good. Because they took the time to care about the craft. And yes, I understand that they are very much a lot older than most of these little artists like Lil Pump, Lil Yachty, Tekashi 69, all these people. I respect that they're older and that they grew up during a time where they might have been younger back then, but they're older now. And so when they're putting out music now, you know, they still have that mentality of the old ways from back in the 80s and 90s. And that's cool. That's cool. That's fine. That's awesome, right? But I just feel like y'all need to, as much as you guys are clowning these new school rappers, clowning them, you also need to be helping them. Help them. They don't understand what they're doing. They're just putting out garbage, and it's fine for their generation. But if you're going to criticize this new wave of rappers, at least help them. At least be a helping hand to help them so that they know, oh, this is something that is actually a art form that should be taken seriously, and I should care more about what I'm putting out into the world, because in 20 years my generation is probably going to look back at my music and say, what was I thinking? This music sucks. And I respect that they want to be edgy and cool and new. I mean, of course, we wanted to be that way back in the 90s and 80s, you know? Our forefathers in jazz and in soul music, they didn't think that hip-hop was going to last. They thought it was some teen fad. But look at it where it is now. And, you know, I personally just think that hip-hop music is an important art form that has been made for the disenfranchisement and the disenfranchisement and the disenfranchised people of all races, really, but mostly for the black, brown, and indigenous people of this country. And it was created that way for us. And I just think it needs to be taken a little bit more seriously. You know what I mean? This is supposed to be a way for us to vent our frustrations about the way that we live in this country and in the way that our people are treated. And, you know, I know sadly because hip-hop became poppy and because of the bling bling era, thanks to a Puff Daddy, it just became really mainstream. It just became very about cars, money, sex, and women. And that's all they talk about. And even to this day, all they talk about is cars, money, sex, and women. And it's sad. And it's really sad. And I just, you know, at least back in the day, take a Tupac, for example. At least back in the day, you would have Tupac talking about I Get Around and all this stuff. And I don't really like that song. But on the same token, he would have a song like Keep Your Head Up, which is a classic. And so the duality of a person is what I think needs to happen in this 21st century mainstream hip-hop culture. Yes, this music sucks, and I'm glad that people like J. Cole and Eminem are able to have a platform to put that out there. But we need to be helping these young artists who don't know anything about hip-hop and don't really understand it at all, don't know the hip-hop history, and don't really know who the pioneers of this game is, why we actually have made hip-hop back in the day and what it is for. And they don't understand the craft. They don't understand the beat making of it. They don't understand the production of it. They don't understand any of that. And I think that needs to change because I think people need to educate them because they need to know about that stuff. And, you know, if you're going to criticize people, at least help them out. And to you new school rappers, try to have some dual personality when it comes to this hip-hop game, okay? Be a Tupac. You're going to have I Get Around? Fine, whatever. I'm not going to be here condoning it, but I respect you for putting it out. But then at the same time, be able to put out a Keep Your Head Up, an ode to women. Be able to put that song out and still be recognized as a dope MC and a legend. Be able to do both. That is something that is completely missing in mainstream hip-hop today. And it's sad. And it's really sad. So, this is my 2 cents on hip-hop and Eminem's whole thing and J. Cole and all of the new school versus old school, new heads versus old heads. Like, that's just how I feel about it. And I just feel like if the old heads are going to go against the new heads, that they need to be educating and helping them out. Because if that's not something that's going to be something that you're going to do, then you going against these artists isn't helping. It's just causing friction and beef for no reason. And I just think that unless you're going to help these artists out, don't just come for them for no reason. Because then you're just sounding exactly like them and not helping to push the culture forward. So this is my 2 cents. Hip hop, I love you. And if you're looking for good artists to listen to from the hip hop genre, please go to the underground. Like, don't listen to what's on the radio. It's trash. It's garbage. It's hot Cheeto flaming garbage. Please do not listen to it. If you're going to listen to good artists, please listen to the Joey Badasses of the world, the J. Coles and the Kendrick Lamars, who are mainstream. The Chance the Rappers, the Vic Mensas. For the underground, listen to the No Names, who is affiliated with Chance the Rapper. Listen to even some indigenous artists who are making hip-hop music today, like the Frank Wands of the world, Chute Scott Martinez, and so many others. And just look to the underground for these artists, and do not try to listen to every Dick and Jane on the radio, because we are in the world of technology and the internet. And when I was growing up, all I had was the mainstream music, and so that was the only way I was able to discover new artists, discover new hip-hop, discover anything. Okay? And even when I was in high school, thanks to the internet, it became a little bit easier for me to get, underground stuff, but even then it was still a little bit hard. So at least now you have the YouTubes and the SoundClouds and the Spotifys of the world. So if you don't like what's on the mainstream radio right now, in terms of hip-hop or any music at all, go to the underground, because they're there and they're waiting and they're hungry and they want you to listen to their music, and they probably are way better than what's on the radio. So that's my 2 cents. And I'll talk to you later. Until next time, peace and blessings.